2B2T is one of the largest servers in Minecraft history, along with one of the oldest, but for millions of players, it's a complete mystery. Even those that are actively keeping up with the Minecraft scene are limited to, oh, it's an old anarchy server where you're allowed to hack. So what actually is 2B2T? What is it like, and why do we care? In today's episode of Minecraft Uncovered, we're going to tell a brief story of the famous 2B2T. The history of 2B2T goes back, far back, way back. Now, I could sit here for the next 4 hours and give you a complete history, but I don't think that's entirely necessary. If that's what you're looking for, put on a FitMC playlist and click play, or better yet, check out DigMC's video on the full history. Instead, I want to give you a very quick rundown of what 2B2T is and how it's progressed through the years. Also, if you want, subscribe. I don't really advertise early in videos, but someone told me to try it out, so here goes. Now, without further ado, let's begin. The year was 2010, the month was August, and at long last, Minecraft Survival Multiplayer had finally released. It was primitive, it was buggy, it was new, but it was an option, and it was an option many players took. The next few months would see tons of servers spring up, and though all but a handful have since died out, one of the survivors was a peculiar server by the name of 2 Builders, 2 Tools. Launching back in October of 2010 as an alternative to a Garry's Mod server, though the world was reset a month later and it only went public in December. For the first half a year or so, 2B2T was ruled by 4chan, which meant it ran basically exactly how it does today, filled with constant verbal harassment and grief to hell and back. But near the end of April, after the owners advertised the server on a forum called Facepunch, a peaceful faction called the Facepunch Republic would challenge the players of 4chan for power and eventually took over for the better part of a year, during which 2B2T saw its first anniversary and its first backdoor hack, the perpetrator being an infamous player known as Pop Bob. Shortly after this, the Republic slowly began to decay and the server died, with just a few dedicated players remaining. During this time, many players from both 4chan and Facepunch would gather together to form a group called Valkyria, whose goal was basically to take over Spawn with the help of a dupe exploit and kill the noobs that came from Reddit and news articles. As Valkyria began to expand into a second headquarters known as Asgard, their base was griefed while under construction, causing the faction's growth to halt for about half a year while their members and friends split into small groups like Gape and the Legion of Shenandoah before heading off on their own. This wouldn't last for long though, as Valkyria would come back bigger than ever, founding 2 new bases known as Fenrir and Asgard 2. At the same time, a very important group known as the Vortex Coalition made their first appearances, and you'll be hearing more from them later. But right now, Asgard 2 just had its coordinates leaked, and in an act of panic and desperation, the members of Valkyria fled or self-destructed, leaving Asgard 2 in ruins and prompting a third takeover of the spawn as revenge, before Valkyria was finally laid to rest along with the blueprints to what would have been their newest home base. After this point, power began to spread to many different small groups, and for about half a year, the server was filled with exploits, stolen accounts, destroyed bases, and occasional waves of new players from gaming news articles. But on June 1st, 2B2T would be changed forever. A YouTuber by the name of The Camping Rusher uploaded a YouTube video exploring the server, and a war would ensue between the Rusher squad and the veterans of the server, led by the one and only FitMC. After record-setting massacres, raids, and takeovers, Rusher would silently admit defeat by disappearing from the server, leaving the veterans to enjoy their victory. Throughout the next year, the server's activity began to calm down from the shock of the Russia War, and despite a few massive events like foreign YouTuber raids, a spawn takeover, a dupe exploit, a map crisis, server crashes, and the final update to 1.12, everything was slowing to a crawl. Soon after though, the Vortex Coalition would come out of the shadows they had laid in for 2 years. And even through war and the rise of many smaller groups like Imperium, UGE, Infrared, and Team Inferno, the Vortex Coalition rose to power. The server somewhat devolved into chaos for about a year at this point, but what you need to know is that there was a lot of griefing, a lot of war, a lot of drama, and a lot of exploits, so nothing new. The biggest takeaways were the appearance of several new YouTubers and an exploit to essentially ban any player by glitching their inventory. More crashes and raids would follow, along with a battle between FitMC and a newer YouTuber named Fuse3, which lasted until the middle of 2019 with the arrival of Etika, a famous game gaming streamer. He brought new life to the server in May and June, but even after his departure from the server and subsequent real-life death, may he rest in peace, the wave of activity continued through his fanbase, an influx of Taiwanese players from a popular forum, and the return of Russia after nearly 3 long years. The worldwide coronavirus quarantine boosted the server even more, and with renewed interest by the owner, who began to spend more time maintaining and updating the server, 2B2T was thriving once again. The server would go through intense maintenance through the latter half of 2020, which also brought many Russian players from foreign YouTube videos, and even Mr. Beast and his posse, who promised not to make a video on 2B2T since it would probably make Housemaster's server room catch on fire. However, another large YouTuber did make a video, one known as LRichMC, who had actually created a huge wave of Spanish players years earlier and had finally returned. Shortly afterwards, 2B2T hits its 10-year anniversary, which coincidentally would be shortly before the launch of the first new map in a decade, a 1.16 test that got leaked to the public because it was never really that private to begin with. Vortex Coalition would finally disband around this time after years of inactivity, but what the server lacked in war and power struggles, they made up for in exploits. What started as an exploit to lag the server and skip the queue evolved into NoCom, a now famous exploit used by a small group named Nerds Inc. to discover over 15,000 bases and over 300,000 unique players. After the exploit leaked on July 15th, the server devolved into chaos for a period of 16 hours before it was patched. But the empty space NoCom left behind was filled with new exploits to destroy Bedrock, crash the server, and chunk ban any player you wanted. On top of that, in December, the infamous Log4j exploit was discovered and almost immediately used on 2B2T to execute code on thousands of players, and the server has to shut down to fix the exploit and control the damage that had already been done. Today, that is where we stand, in the midst of exploits on exploits, both goofy and seriously dangerous, which is, ironically, a very good description of the famous 2B2T itself. So great, now we have a pretty decent idea of how 2B2T came about, the history, and their rise to fame. But we seem to be missing something pretty important. What is 2B2T like today? What is the modern 2B2T experience for the average player? Allow me to give you a brief tour. Step 1. Join the server and wait literally 5 hours to join because there's 1,000 other people waiting and donators can skip the queue. Step 2. Immediately turn off your chat to prevent vision loss from the constant advertisements and verbal abuse. Step 3. Get killed by a spawn camper before you can even move. Step 4. Realize you forgot to log on with a hacked client and wait in the queue for 5 hours again. Step 5. Start to actually play the game. Step 6. Either become an active member of the community or give up after dying from fall damage because you forgot to turn on no fall. Okay, no, it's not quite that bad, but I would not be doing a good job as an unbiased reporter and ambassador to the community if I didn't tell you that it is a rough start. No matter what time of day you join, you're gonna struggle to get in, and buying donator rank is basically a requirement for anyone that plans to play actively. The chat is a literal hellscape, and I would highly suggest not interacting with anyone whatsoever, or you probably aren't gonna have a very good time. Unfortunately, that seems to be a trend with a lot of anarchy servers, so trying an alternative probably won't help much. Dying is inevitable, and surviving for even a few minutes is an accomplishment. If you make it that far, give yourself a pat on the back, but make sure you're flying away from spawn at Mach 10 if you do, since that's really the only chance you have of making it out alive. As for getting started, the best advice I can give is to ask your friends for a starter kit. Kits are basically the most important thing you can get as a new player, and they usually come in the form of shulker boxes containing armor, weapons, healing, blocks, projectiles, and everything else you need to stay alive. Asking in the wasteland of a chat isn't very likely to get you anything, since there seems to be some sort of unspoken rule that starter kits are only given out to people who don't ask, which is not exactly the smartest rule in my opinion, but hey, it's their kits, so they decide. Finding a kit in some old abandoned base or getting one gifted from a friend are your best options here. But once you have yourself a kit, just enjoy. Anarchy servers really do have no rules, which means the possibilities are endless. On 2B2T, you can start fights like a PvP server, raid bases like a faction server, build monuments like a creative server, and a heck of a lot more. When you peel past the layers on layers of rotten players and the difficult start, 2B2T really does have something unique to it that no other server has managed to imitate in over 11 years since it was launched. Combined with the total total and complete freedom that comes with anarchy, 2b2t truly is one of the greatest servers in Minecraft's history. That's all for the video, and I hope you all enjoyed. I do want to let you all know that uploads might slow down for a little bit since I'm working on some projects and school just started up again, but I should hopefully be able to keep up with weekly uploads either way, just a fair warning. Other than that, like if you liked, subscribe if you want more, join my Discord if you want to talk about cool things, and yeah, have a good one guys. Peace.